Good morning. At this time, we're going to turn to our leaflets. To everything, there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up.
A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance.
A time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing.
And with the
and a time to cast away.
A time to run, a time to sow. A time to keep silent and a time to speak.
A
time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace.
Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me.
In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you.
And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also.
And whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know. Thomas said unto him, Lord, we know not whither thou goest, and how can we know the way? Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me.
For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, or nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus. Bow your heads. Father, we are gathered in this solemn place to remember the life and to mourn the death of our loved one. We ask that you would comfort each family member and friend. May they turn to your word for comfort, be encouraged through happy memories, and purpose in their hearts to seek you while you may be found. To Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Amen. Thank you, Chaplain. Good morning, members. You may be seated, please. Please stand for the national song.
Good morning. Today's scripture reading is taken from Revelations 21, reading from verse 1 to 7. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son.
Thank you. You may be seated. Honorable members of the Assembly, the Right Reverend Bishop Errol Brooks, former members of the Anguilla House of Assembly, Teacher Norma Hughes and the family of the late Mr. Hubert Hughes, His Honor Magistrate Mr. Keithley Benjamin, OBE, Permanent Secretaries, Commissioner of Police Mr. David Lynch, Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Elliot Forbes, heads of departments, chairpersons, and directors of government agencies, Dean of Administration, St. James Medical School, Dr. Jose Ramirez, other invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Today, we gather to honor and pay tribute to our fallen comrade, the late Mr. Hubert Benjamin Hughes, Honorable Past Member for Road South and the former Chief Minister of Anguilla. 3 minutes could never do justice to this larger-than-life patriot, who himself holds the record of speaking 3 full days during a budget debate. Mr. Hughes's distinguished service and contributions to our nation will forever be assessed whenever discussions about leadership arise. A leader of towering character and integrity, he was committed to defending the rights of all his people, regardless of their status, and especially the disenfranchised, whom he represented with fervor and great determination. On a personal note, I had the distinct privilege of working with Mr. Hughes during the election campaign of 2010, after which he invited me to be Speaker, an opportunity for which I continue to be forever grateful. In fact, he was adamant about greater female representation in the Anguilla House of Assembly, as he desired to see Anguillan women play a more prominent and meaningful role in the decision-making process of their island. Like every relationship, we too had our disagreements, but we never allowed that to distract us from achieving our goals to get Anguilla on track. Mr. Hughes had an enormous presence and could rise to the occasion to debate at any given moment, while never ceasing to give a good history lesson in the process. He also had the ability to work with everyone, even members of the opposition. Although he was constantly criticized for his many intense battles with the British, whatever was done, he did to ensure that Anguilla and Anguillians were protected and never disadvantaged. Not only in Anguilla, but also throughout the region, Mr. Hughes was very well respected. I distinctly remember being at a regional conference in Grenada. When the chief showed up, the outpouring of love and respect shown by the various delegates made me extremely proud to know that an Anguillan leader was held in such high regard. Indeed, Anguilla has lost a true statesman. To his wife, Teacher Norma, and his entire family, and to the people of Anguilla, we share your deep grief for the loss of a patriot. May his memory be a blessing and an inspiration to us all. I make apologies for Mrs. Keisha Carty, past member of the Assembly, who is ill today. We wish her well. And also for the Honorable Leader for Valley North, Mr. Evans McNeil Rogers, who's going to be a bit late this morning. I know he's in quarantine and he's trying to make it here. Hopefully he does safely. We now invite tribute from the Honorable Member, Honorable Single Island-wide Electoral District Member, Mr. Kenneth Hodge.
Madam Speaker, I am deeply honored to have been given the opportunity to share a few thoughts on this auspicious occasion today, when we are all gathered in this honorable house to pay tribute to our fallen leader, former Chief Minister Hubert Benjamin Hughes. On behalf of my wife and family, I wish to extend sincere condolences to his dear wife, Teacher Norma Hughes, son and cabinet colleague, the Honorable Hayden Hughes, Greg Hughes, and indeed the entire Hughes family. I was privileged that the late Hubert Benjamin Hughes considered me among his circle of friends and acquaintances, and I spent many an hour on the phone or on his veranda conversing on so many topics. I will always hold those memories dear. Much has been already said and will be said today and in the weeks and months and perhaps years to come in glowing tribute about the life and legacy of this outstanding Anguillian. So the two questions, Madam Speaker, I wish to pose in this honorable house today are: what was the measure of this man? What made Hubert Benjamin Hughes so loved and respected? The answer is simple, Madam Speaker. He was a people's man. He was a very humble, kind, compassionate, generous, and caring leader. His people loved him. That was the essence of the man, the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes. This was so evident during the motorcade on Tuesday. It was heartwarming to see the throngs of persons, including school children, who turned out at the roadside in the various communities, waving flags and many of them singing the national song and other words of comfort. I too would like to leave these words of comfort with you, the grieving family, and indeed the nation at this time. This short poem I will read is entitled The Measure of a Man. The author's name is not mentioned, but the words capture his personality beautifully. Not how did he die, but how did he live? Not what did he gain, but what did he give? These are the things that measure the worth of a man as a man, regardless of birth. Not what was his station, but had he a heart? And how did he play his God-given part? Was he ever ready with a word of good cheer to bring back a smile, to banish a tear? Not what was his church, not what was his creed, but had he befriended those really in need? Not what did the article in the newspaper say, but how many were sorry that he passed away? These are the things that measure the worth of a man as a man, regardless of birth. This man, the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, was not only our leader, but our friend. May his soul rest in perpetual peace. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member for West End is recognised.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I often say when I stand in the House, I owe a great gratitude to the people of District 7 who voted me into office in 2015 and again in 2020. And as I stand here today, I'm standing to represent them, as I've always done, and also to offer condolences to Teacher Norma, to the Honourable Hayden Hughes, to Greg, and all the other family members and close friends of the Honourable Hubert Benjamin Hughes. Love him or hate him, Madam Speaker, you had to respect him, because for his 40 years of service, it tells you exactly what it took within him. It's something you cannot put within someone. It has to be within. Because any of my colleagues who have taken the path of being a politician or going out to campaign, they know how difficult it is. And to have done that successfully for over 40 years, Madam Speaker, says the worth of the man. And quite often we talk about a relationship between District 6 and 7. And over the years, the Honourable Albert Belter Hughes and Hubert Hughes formed a partnership that bond not just the AUM, but bonded the people of District 6 and District 7. And what I will say, Madam Speaker, is that both men care dearly, as I'm sure all politicians do and should do, care very much about their people. For me, Madam Speaker, on a personal note, I never really spoke a great deal of politics with the late Hubert Hughes, Honourable Hubert Hughes. But what I will tell you, Madam Speaker, is that in my early years of coming back to Anguilla in the off-season from cricket in England, I would find myself at the home of Teacher Norma and the Honourable Hubert Hughes for lunch. We talked about world events, but very rarely talked about politics. And in 1997, I had the great honour of being given a benefit year by Hampshire for long service. And to be able to have the Honourable Hubert Hughes, who was the then Chief Minister of Anguilla, to be my guest speaker at the Long Room at Lord's, again said much for me, but also for what he meant to Anguilla. And as a community in Slough, again I'll say mainly Slough, but throughout England, it meant quite a great deal that on the field and off the field, we were represented. And for most people who may not appreciate what Lord's or the cricket ground at Lord's mean, it is pretty much an invitational place. And again, Madam Speaker, to have him there as my guest speaker meant so much to me. But again, Madam Speaker, as we go through the next couple of days, we have to give honor to the man that has put so much time and effort into representing Anguilla both at home and abroad, representing, as the Minister mentioned earlier, about caring about his people, and that is something you could always say about him. Madam Speaker, on behalf of my family, my friends, the constituency of West End, all the Anguillians in Slough and throughout England, we offer condolences again to Teacher Norma, to the Honourable Hayden Hughes, and the rest of the family. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member for West End. The Honourable Member for Valley South is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is difficult to honor the legacy of a man who could talk for 3 days in this honorable House uninterrupted in 3 minutes, and I dare say it now forms a part of his lengthy legacy, as you have reflected. I didn't know the late Honorable Mr. Hubert Benjamin Hughes personally, but what I perceived to be his legacy was bigger than my personal knowledge, and it was something that I respected. He was a shrewd and prudent politician, and equally shrewd and prudent in finance. He was a fighter for the best interests of his people. He gave without thinking, and he was an unapologetic black man who praised his people. Regardless of your personal views or your political views about the length of his speeches, when the late Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes spoke, he taught you about yourself, and he taught you about your history. In short, I believe his legacy to be that of an educator, a historian, a powerful politician, and the people's champion. And that legacy is forever etched in my heart. So on behalf of the people of District 4 and my family, to his beautiful wife, Teacher Norma, my colleague Hayden Hughes, Greg, and the rest of the Hughes family, thank you for sharing this honorable man with us and with Anguilla. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Valley South. The Honourable Member, Single Island Wide Electoral District, Mr. Joseph Anthopol, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Unlike the rest of my colleagues in this room, at least most of them, I have had the privilege of working closely with Mr. Hughes, whether that was either inside or out of active politics. My colleague for the Honorable Representative for District 7 mentioned something a while ago. Love him or hate him, you have to respect him. And that's something that I've noted as a politician, especially in Anguilla. There are going to be persons who love you, and there are going to be persons who hate you, regardless of what you do or what you say. The man who has earned of not should be of all Anguillians. I have to say thank you not only to Mr. Hughes for the contribution that he has made, but also to his family, to Teacher Norma, to Greg, the rest of the family, and to my honorable colleague, the representative for District South, for Road South. The reason that I have to say thank you to all of you is because 1 year as a politician can feel like a decade. So I can imagine what it's like to actually serve your country for decades on end, to have to wait up those lonely nights waiting for your husband, your father to come home, to have to understand that he's giving a sacrifice to something bigger than himself and bigger to his family. So to all of you for the sacrifice that you would have to make or that you have made until now, I want to say thank you. To serve as a leader of a country, much less as a politician, is an incredible feat. And Mr. Hughes, there are things that he is infamous for publicly, but it's the things that aren't so public that I was made to be aware of. The stories that I was told from the persons, in fact, some very close to me, of the things that Mr. Hughes did and the way he stood up and defended them, that has earned the respect of that man for me. Regardless of where we stand on certain decisions, as my colleague said, he was infamous for his stance on the British. But whether we're pro-independence or against it, at the end of the day, I believe that regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, we're all working towards the same purpose. We all want to see Anguilla grow, develop, move to that point where we can be self-sufficient, self-reliant. And I think that that was the ultimate goal, and that's a goal that I don't think anyone can disagree with. Madam Speaker, I hope to one day leave even a fraction of the mark that this man has left on our island and have my legacy known in such high regard, if that's one day possible. Because, Madam Speaker, he was an incredible man. Once again, I want to say thank you to the Honorable Mr. Hughes for his contribution, and to his family. I'll be keeping you in my prayers as you go through this tough time. Thank you once again. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Single Island White Electoral District Member, Mr. Joseph Anthopol. Welcome, Mr. Rogers. The Honorable Member for Valley North is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And a pleasant good morning to all of you who are here. And I'm sure that the protocol would have already been established. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of myself, my immediate family, and my extended family to pay tribute to my friend. And by describing him as my friend, I will refer to him basically as Hubert. No disrespect, Madam Speaker, or to anyone in the gallery, but that is the type of relationship that we had over the years. So on behalf of myself, my family, immediate and extended, I would want to convey our condolences to Teacher Norma and the rest of Hubert's immediate family and extended family during these difficult times. Madam Speaker, while we are paying tribute to Mr. Hughes, we should also use this opportunity to pay tribute to Mrs. Hughes for putting up with him and putting up with us, Anguillians, for well over 40 years in his political life, and for his children. Madam Speaker, there is no doubt that Anguilla lost a giant, a political giant, a political icon with the passing of Hubert, former Chief Minister of Anguilla. Historically, he became Anguilla's Chief Minister on 3 different occasions and was the longest-serving elected parliamentarian in the history of Anguilla thus far. And that is by no means, Madam Speaker, an easy accomplishment and or achievement by any stretch of the imaginations or any type of standards. But I believe that it is an accomplishment that will be around for quite a long time. You just heard the youngest parliamentarian mention 1 year in politics. Seems like a lifetime. And to be around and being constantly and continuously being elected for about 4 decades is no easy achievement at all. Madam Speaker, Hubert was an astute politician. He made no bones about his affinity and his support for Labour. And for those of us who are old enough to remember that if there was one word or name of a person, when mentioned, could have united Anguillians, that was the name of Robert Bradshaw. And even though Hubert was a strong and staunch Labour supporter, he managed to cement or concretize his place in District 6, even when the father of the nation was very active in politics. Madam Speaker, one may not have always agreed with Hubert's style, his attitude and approach as it relates to issues surrounding politics, whether it's campaign politics, whether it's governance and our diplomacy. And when I say attitude, style, and approach, I use those 3 words in this honorable House while he was leader of government business. And we debated about it. And from time to time, Madam Speaker, we had clashes as well in this honorable House. But there is no doubt that in relation to the overall development of Anguilla and its people, that Hubert was in line with all our past leaders, and he was in line with all of us representatives who are representing the people of Anguilla. And that is, they wanted the best for Anguilla, and all of us in this honorable house, we still want the best for Anguilla and its citizens. Hubert was a unique and special individual in many ways. And despite being political opponents, Hubert and I had a very special bond, a very special friendship that went beyond politics. It was personal. And when I would visit him in his last days, and I'm sure when visitors were restricted, I called Teacher Nama. I said, Teacher Nama, how's the chief doing? I'm on my way to visit him. I was always welcome. On my last visit, she said to him, Hubert, your friend Neil is here. He opened his eyes, he rolled them around in acknowledgement that I was there. I always cherish our relationships. Unique in the sense, and I can speak not for 3 days, 3 hours, but I can speak quite a bit about the period between 2010 and 2015 when he was leader of government business and I was then leader of the parliamentary opposition. But I'll just mention 3 occasions, Madam Speaker. I remembered when there was an amendment that was supposed to be made to the Education Act. And as someone said before, I believe, he had the ability to reach across the aisle. And I was sitting on this side, and the Honorable Athlin Anthopol we were members of the opposition. And he reached across because he was not sure that he had the support of his entire cabinet. He knew that he had the support of the then Minister of Education, Hubert, and himself. And he reached across, we discussed it, Madam Speaker, and I assured him that we will have absolutely no issue in supporting that amendment, which had some financial consequences as well. Again, Madam Speaker, another occasion, he reached across the aisle, and again, because of the political calendar, it didn't work out, an amendment to the Legislators' Pensions Act, Madam Speaker. And a lot of folks who follow politics would realize that that particular conversation, well, it was taped and used on political platforms. It didn't matter. But the point I am making, Madam Speaker, is that he reached across. I supported that amendment then, Madam Speaker, and I support it now. Whenever it comes to this honorable house, and I'm here, I will defend it, because there are a lot of anomalies in there, Madam Speaker, archaic and unfair to some of us as politicians. And the third example, Madam Speaker, is with the inaugural sitting of the OECS Parliament. Hubert was then leader of government business, and I was leader of the opposition. And we traveled to Antigua together. Of course, we were dignitaries. You would have one entourage and another entourage, and as we exited the VIP lounge, he said to me, Neil, where are you going? I said, Chief, that's your entourage. This is my entourage here. I'm going with these guys. They're going to take me to the hotel. He said, no, you all go ahead. I will go with Neil. The folks believed that it was something unusual, because here it is, leader of government business and the leader of opposition traveling together in one vehicle, and the rest of our colleagues attending that meeting didn't even travel on the same flight. So, again, we talk about getting our flowers while we're living. Teacher Nama, while it's tribute to My dear friend, this is also a tribute to you for the work that you've done and putting up with Hubert and all of us for those years. It is always said, you need to get our flowers while we're living, and it would have been nice. Hindsight is always 20/20, but it would have been nice to have this tribute on his last birthday. I don't know whether, because the suggestion came from across the aisle, that it wasn't taken up, but whatever the case is, he is there, and my dear good friend, he has done his tour of duty. He has fought a courageous fight. His earthly sojourn is over, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure that he would have had time to make peace with his master. Rest on, my dear friend.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Valley North. Honourable Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mr. Kyle Hodge is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am grateful for this opportunity as an elected member of this honorable House to say a few words about our beloved Honorable Mr. Hubert Benjamin Hughes, former Chief Minister of Anguilla, Anguilla's third Chief Minister, who would have served as Chief on 3 occasions. He was a warrior for people, Madam Speaker, an intellect, and may I dare say, add, a grassroots intellect, never forgetting where he came from. A relentless politician, and if you listened last night to the many tributes in South Hill, a man of the people, a man who loved people, especially his own black people. Mr. Hughes would have served Anguilla and the people of Anguilla for 40+ years. He would have served this nation incredibly well, and he would always be remembered for his contribution to the development of Anguilla in general, but also, Madam Speaker, to the many people who had access to him. And the truth about access to Mr. Hughes is everybody and anybody who wanted access simply had that access. The doors at his house, they were not locked. They were not unlocked. They were open. So he impacted in a positive way a lot of people. As we prepare to lay to rest the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, I continue to ponder on how his life in politics, his approach to it, his fight for the people, his wisdom on a wide range of topics, his passion for fairness, his relentless attitude in pursuit for better for his people. How these characteristics, Madam Speaker, can influence and inspire us who are now charged with running the affairs of this nation to follow in his footsteps. The way he defended his people, showing up at the job sites to address issues head on. The way he communicated with his people, speaking to anyone, anywhere, showing much respect. The way he dealt with the British and studied their history and understood their politics. Mr. Hughes was one of a kind. Mr. Hughes meant a lot to the people of Anguilla, and the people of Anguilla meant a lot to Mr. Hughes. To the hospitality workers of Anguilla, he was their champion. To the civil servants of Anguilla, he was a great leader. And to the people of District 6, Madam Speaker, he was a true and dedicated representative. And in all of this, Madam Speaker, there is Teacher Nama, his wife, Thank you for your sacrifice, as politics and the people would have consumed a lot of his time and a lot of your time by extension. You would have been there enduring the stresses that comes along with politics. May God grant you the strength during this difficult time to carry on. Thank you. And thanks to his children, Greg and Hayden, for their sacrifices as well, because it could not have been easy being the children of Hubert. I extend my sympathies to the entire family, and I say to Minister Hayden Hughes, you resemble many things of your dad. Follow in his footsteps. May you carry on his legacy. Rest in peace, Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Attorney General is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for granting me this opportunity to make a few remarks on this sad but very special occasion. Unlike my colleagues and other distinguished members, my brief remarks will not come from a context of political camaraderie, but I will speak from a personal note, and certainly from human experience, having met the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes's distinguished acquaintance. Indeed, Madam Speaker, you were quite correct in that before coming to Anguilla, the reputation and the fame, so to speak, of the late Mr. Hubert Hughes extended beyond the shores of Anguilla. But when I took up my appointment here, after the usual traditional courtesies of making a call on the resident judge and having a private audience with the practicing Queen's Counsel, the first notable visitor I got at the time was Mr. Hubert Hughes. And I distinctly remember that he visited me, I think, if memory serves me well, in a short sleeve shirt and I think sandals. But what he had to say was profound and more meaningful to me than his simple and casual appearance. He was delighted, apparently, very much so, in my appointment for reasons which he disclosed to me. And he said to me that to do this job in Anguilla, you have to be tough. Tough. That was the word used. And right he was. He told me what to expect of the establishment, the civil service, the people. And true to his form and character. We discussed many things, including a lot of historical experiences, which he knew intimately, and persons which he knew personally. He had a cutting intellect, an incomparable memory, and certainly an enormous human repertoire. Since that visitation, not very regularly, from time to time, I would get a call to see how things are going. And that was something I profoundly appreciated. The conversations by telephone then were not very long, but they were of a very high order. No small talk, but very much good intent. On an occasion like this, I know it would be a difficult burden, and I know my honorable colleague will feel that there are big shoes that he must fit. But I know he's his own man, and I know that a grateful nation mourns him, and a proud family will miss him. So, Madam Speaker, I thank you kindly for your indulgence, for allowing me to say these brief remarks, and may his soul and the souls of the faithful departed rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Attorney General. The Honorable Member for Single Island Wide Electoral District, Mrs. Quincy Gunsmaree, is recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to deliver these brief remarks in this honorable House. Madam Speaker, after endings, it is normal to survey a trail from the beginning. This year has been a series of moments where I've had the opportunity, through his son, Hayden Hughes, and others, to reflect on Mr. Hughes. Each moment where we thought the end was near was an invitation to reflect on his legacy and principles. No story was ever without reason. Mr. Hughes lived an intentional life. Hubert Benjamin Hughes's life was a lesson on differences and how important it is for us to exist as we are, to carve out room for individualism. How he never had a closed door. That was different. How he confronted investors when their work undermined Anguillians. That was different. How he stood against the Anguillian Revolution. That as well was different. How he made time to listen to his technical staff and ensure that they were treated exactly as he was. That was different. His weekly trips to the hospital to visit any ailing person, regardless of where they're from. That was different. How he confronted the British. That was different. How he regarded government resources. That was different. How he rejected first-class trips to protect government's purse. That was different. How he cared for Anguilla and regarded the Anguillian. That was different. His style and approach, different. But it worked, and it served Anguilla well. I sat with Mr. Hughes, a youth representative, on the constitutional reform. I understood the Anguilla he aspired to leave behind. Midway through our exercise, there was a white paper released by the UK government saying that we could not do exactly what we were doing. Mr. Hughes' instruction. Mr. Hughes' instruction, do it anyway. At least there'll be record of the Anguilla that we wanted. I remember when I learned that the committee would no longer function. Feeling defeated, I sat in a conference room where he spoke uninterrupted to the I cannot recall the full speech, but I remember the moment where he looked directly at me and said, I knew that this would never happen in my lifetime, but I am fighting for you, that in your lifetime there will be a more balanced constitution. He paused. There will never be balance, he continued, because colonialism thrives off of having the upper hand. But it doesn't change the fact that Anguilla and Anguillians deserve more. That was the moment I knew Mr. Hughes was different. That moment stayed with me, so much so that by the next election, I was on Mr. Hughes' rostrum, hailing his achievements between the periods of 2010 to 2015. How he moved this country from being moments away from a British takeover to periods of growth, proper management, prudence. Mr. Hughes different. Some moments before the 2020 general elections, a few colleagues in the Anguilla Progressive Movement and myself sat on his porch while he recalled a few of his historic moments that occurred right there in his yard, some even on his doorstep. He concluded with a tip. The secret to dealing with the British, he said in a hushed voice, keep your hands clean. No amount of degrees and experience will do. You just need clean hands. Mr. Hughes was different. We have seen those differences mocked, defamed, and shunned. And certainly there are very real differences between us all. Age, sex, height, skin color, hair, eye color. But as one author said it is not those differences between us that are separating us. It is rather our refusal to recognize those differences and to examine the distortions which result from misnaming them, and their effects on us and our trajectory as a country. Too often we pour energy needed for recognizing and exploring difference into pretending that those differences are insurmountable barriers. And instead of using those differences as a springboard to positive change within our lives, we treat human difference as human deviance. Mr. Hughes was different. He was honest. He was kind. Hubert Benjamin Hughes believed in Anguilla's self-determination, the ability to define ourselves, name ourselves, and speak for ourselves instead of being defined and spoken for by others. Hubert Benjamin Hughes believed in collective work and responsibility, the ability to build and maintain our communities, ourselves, and together, and to recognize and solve our problems together. Each of us here are interconnected, because I would like to believe that each of us, in one way or another, share a commitment to building a better Anguilla. So in what ways are we truly any different from him? Hubert Benjamin Hughes left us with a peculiar lesson, and it was not to be like him, but to be different in our pursuit of the same. To his loved ones, particularly his wife, Mrs. Norma Hughes, my friend and brother, Hayden Hughes, Mr. and Mrs. Greg Hughes, on behalf of my and the people of Anguilla, we share our heartfelt condolences. And we thank you for sharing him with Anguilla. Mr. Hubert Benjamin Hughes, a man with a difference who made a difference. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Just to remind members to be mindful of the time, you're allotted 3 minutes for your tribute. I now recognize the Honourable Member for Road North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning again, everyone. Madam Speaker, as we pause to remember the life and the legacy of Anguilla's third Chief Minister, the late Honourable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, I join in expressing my heartfelt condolences, first to his family and friends, to our dear teacher Nama, my friend, I won't even say colleague because I consider him a friend above everything else, Hayden, my other friend Greg, please accept my humble condolences. I would also like to express condolences to the past and present cabinet members of this honorable House who had the pleasure of serving with Mr. Hughes. I know those were some exciting times. He was dearly loved by all of Anguilla, so the whole of Anguilla is mourning Mr. Hughes today. We are grateful to the late Mr. Hughes for the role that he played in Anguilla's development, and as he uncompromisingly stood on principles in the fight for the people of the island. Over the years, Mr. Hughes has shown outstanding strength and vigor. He was a man that stood on strong values and was not afraid to speak his mind, not to stand for what he believed was right. Mr. Hughes is hailed as being the longest serving politician and as a 3 times Chief Minister of this island. He has left behind a legacy, one that speaks volumes to his love for our country and the people of Anguilla. He was a stalwart of a man, especially in his political career, never wavering, brave, valiant. Mr. Hughes was a real patriot and will be greatly missed. The sound advice that he had to impart will be missed, but the work that he has done will always live on. May the God of all comfort comfort all who mourn his passing, and may he rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Deputy Governor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I consider it a great honor and a privilege to have known the Honourable Hubert Benjamin Hughes on a personal level, and also as Minister of Finance during my time in the public service. Growing up in South Hill, Madam Speaker, as a young boy, I spent a lot of time in the Hughes household with Hayden, Brian of blessed memory, and my friend Greg. And my childhood is filled with very fond memories of the mischief that we made as young boys are known to do. But what I recall most about that time, Madam Speaker, is Mr. Hughes just couldn't stand idleness. You had to be doing something productive or worthwhile with your time. Whether it was academic or trade-related, you just had to be doing something worthwhile. And he dealt with me in pretty much the same manner, Madam Speaker. If I'm idling around and distracting Greg or Brian from whatever task was assigned, it was quite simple. You either had to help or go back to your grandmother's house. Simple as that. And I saw that attitude on display as I worked closely with Mr. Hughes when he was Minister of Finance. And we traveled extensively from London to Gibraltar to Barbados and all over. And because of his disdain for idleness, Madam Speaker, the schedule for those trips were always packed tightly. he was very clear that if he was spending the people's money to come all this way, we had to make it worth their while. And we did it, Madam Speaker. Meeting after meeting, presentation after presentation, Mr. Hughes' passion and commitment to Anguilla never wavered. Whether it was a meeting with the FCO or the Prime Minister himself or potential investors, Mr. Hughes always made a point of putting Anguilla first. Mr. Hughes also had a charm and a humility about him. Despite his high office, he was always accessible, almost to a fault. When we traveled, Madam Speaker, a lot of times he declined the pomp and ceremony that, in my view, every head of state is entitled to, particularly when they return home. But such was his nature in terms of minding the public purse. And, Madam Speaker, you know how it is with travel. There's a lot of waiting around, sitting in departure lounges, sitting in taxis, waiting for trains and everything else. And you fill the time by talking. And on those occasions, Mr. Hughes told some amazing stories that ranged from poignant to funny. And he always had some very good sound advice for me about life, career, and everything in between. And I'm very appreciative of those experiences. So as a young public servant, I'm very grateful to Mr. Hughes for those opportunities. And those trips will be forever highlights of my career. Madam Speaker, I also wish to place on record my sincere thanks and appreciation to Teacher Nama for her quiet dignity and strength throughout Mr. Hughes' career, and now during this difficult time. I am convinced that were it not for her support, Mr. Hughes would not have been as effective as he was. The Governor and I visited Mrs. Hughes recently, and we saw Mr. Hughes shortly before he passed, and recently we saw Mrs. Hughes again. And on that occasion, we talked about Mr. Hughes' life and legacy, and the Governor was quite keen to understand, what are some of the things that shaped Mr. Hughes. And of course, Mrs. Hughes was able to give that context. She also used the occasion to tell a few embarrassing stories, but funny, nevertheless, about me as a young boy, which the Governor thought was quite funny, and they probably were. But it was a very wonderful meeting, Madam Speaker, because as we left, we both remarked about Mrs. Hughes's poise and composure during this difficult time, because we know that this loss definitely cuts deep. Mrs. Hughes, I pray that you find the strength and comfort during this difficult time. And to my friends, Hayden and Greg, who feels it, knows it, even as grown men, the loss of a father cuts deep. And I pray that you too find the strength to carry on. I also have to recognize Orlin, Dave, and Nixon as members of the household, and I do offer my condolences to you as well. The people of Anguilla owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Mr. Hughes. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Governor. The Honorable Member for Road South is recognized.
Madam Speaker, gallery, and Dorothy. A lot of you may not know Aunt Dorothy. This is my Aunt Dorothy. She's actually older than my dad. And it's good to have you here. I stand here today in Parliament not only as elected representative for Road South, a post held by the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes from 1976 to 2015, but also as the eldest son of Daddy and Mama, Norma Yvonne Hughes, family fourth. Someone once asked, what did I accomplish other than being the son of Hubert Hughes? And I immediately recognized the honor and good fortune I had as being his son. I've had the privilege to grow up in his house. He was an active father. He taught us to work hard, to sacrifice, to not waste our youth, but to ensure that to use our time wisely so that we can look back with pride in the days that we are no longer physically able to do so. He instilled in us the values of representation, philanthropy, constant learning and evolution, and to remain with family and God. And that is why the relationship between this family is unparalleled and the bond is so tight. 3 minutes is not merely enough time, but my father, Daddy, the chief, believed in the ability of Anguillians both at home and in the diaspora. He believed in Caribbean people, and he looked at them as one of us. He believed in Caribbean integration, and his experiences as a sailor with his older brother, Uncle Freddie, must have shaped his worldview. In 2010, on the recommendation of the Honorable Edison Beard, he named me Parliamentary Secretary with responsibility for tourism after having won that election. The hard work that he taught us was then put to work, and I supported him, and he supported his cabinet in the thrust to create an Anguilla that he envisioned decades earlier. During the budget debate in 2014, I tied him for speaking for 3 days. The record is still to be broken. And during this term of office, if the Honorable Premier would allow me, that record will fall. As fate may have it, in December of 2014, the chief took us all to lunch at Chef Alfonso's Caribbean restaurant. It was the Honorable Evans McNeil Rogers, the Honorable Atlin Vanterpool, Olitimus, and I, who drove together. And after we had had lunch, on our way up, just outside of Walton Fleming, we heard the sirens going down. And we pulled off of the road. And I turned to them and I said, this has to be serious. And we drove on and we came to the Honorable House where I had recessed. And I rose to begin to speak. And I was just about to turn my phone off. And I got a call from Greg, my youngest brother. And he said, Hayden, where are you? I said, I'm in the house. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm about to speak. He said, can you come by the hospital? I said, no, I'm about to speak. He said, it's Brian. I said, what happened? He said, he's not feeling too well. I said, well, it can wait. He said, no, it's a little serious. So I turned to the speaker and I asked the speaker if she could recess the house so that we can go to the Princess Alexandra Hospital. And all of us, the Honorable Everett McNeil Rogers, the Honorable Olitimus Vanterpool, the Honorable Jerome Roberts, the Honorable Evan Gomes, the Honorable Edison Beard, the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, and I, we went over to the hospital, and there was a large crowd over there. And my father and I went inside, and we sat outside of the emergency room. And he bent over, and he looked up to me, and he said, he's dead. And I said, what? He said, Brian is dead. I felt it. Call Keith. Keith was his driver. And I said, no. And I got up and I looked, and they were using, is that a defibrillator? And I looked at him and I said, he is dead. Greg and I not only lost a brother, but Daddy lost Brian, his second son. And this was a tough time for him and all of us. 2019 through 2020 and 21 was a difficult time for us as a family. His illness sapped his energy, but he continued to care about Anguilla immensely. And when he landed at the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport, he dropped to his knees and he kissed the ground. We spoke daily. The life of Anguilla and politics. We never thought he would make it home to witness my election, something that motivated him to stay around. He loved Anguilla and he loved politics, but he also loved family. And he would begin talking when I showed up, even on days when he never uttered a word. Mama would call me in her Bajan accent, "Hayden, come talk to Daddy. He hasn't said anything for the day." On June 29, 2020, I was elected while he was in quarantine with Nix. I remembered broken down, and when I called him and he asked, "Are you crying? Why are you crying?" But the history of this event touched us, because he first ran in 1961. But it wasn't until 15 years later that he was elected. And I too first ran in 2005. And it wasn't until 15 years later, in 2020, that I was elected. And my father got to see this happen. Ailing as he was a constant source of guidance and advice, right to the end. Advice that will guide me over my lifetime. Advice, open doors. He was a great advisor. As we now know, the Honorable James Ronald Webster is the father of the nation, but the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes was the godfather of the nation. There's much I can say, but there'll be many opportunities to talk about the life and times of the man, the legend, my father, our father, the long-standing elected member for Road South, District 6. May he rest in perpetual peace.
Thank you, Honorable Member for Road South. The Honorable Member for Sandy Hill, Leader of Opposition, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, good morning to you, to my fellow members of the Anguilla House of Assembly, to the former members of the Anguilla House of Assembly, the audience in the gallery, including Mrs. Norma Hughes and the family, and to viewers and listeners on the radio and social media near and far. Madam Speaker, for a man who lived abroad and returned home to assist in the development of his country, a man who first entered the political arena at 28 years old and became the longest-serving politician in Anguilla, a man who was able to create a movement around his vision for Anguilla, a man who was renowned across the region and internationally for his forthright and astute manner, a man who was to and to commemorate the life of the late Honorable Mr. Hubert Benjamin Hughes. Unlike some of the persons here today, Madam Speaker, I will have had only limited opportunities to come into direct contact with Mr. Hubert Hughes in a personal or official capacity. Although through him that I first found that we were related. I can specifically recall that Mr. Hughes contacted me while I sat as Minister of Labor and Immigration, seeking assistance on each occasion. And what struck me, Madam Speaker, was that the assistance sought was not for himself, but for other persons. Whether it was an immigration issue, or a permanent residency issue, or a belonger issue, or a work permit issue, Mr. Hughes would pick up his phone and call me in order to assist in finding ways to help these persons. Here was a man who had retired from active politics, who no longer held a ministerial portfolio or an elected representative title, but yet he went out of his way to see what he could do for others. And that impressed me, Madam Speaker, and remained with me. On behalf of myself and my family, the residents of the District 2 constituency, and the members of the Anguilla United Front, I wish to extend profound sympathies to Mrs. Norma Hughes, the Honourable Member for Road South, Mr. Hayden Hughes, and the family, friends, and loved ones on the loss of the late Honourable Mr. Hubert Benjamin Hughes. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Sandy Hill and Leader of Opposition. The Honourable Member for Island Harbour, Premier, is recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, members of the House, past and present, members of the gallery, those listening or viewing on other media. As we pay tribute to our former Chief Minister, the Honourable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, I wish heartfelt condolences to his wife, Teacher Norma, his children, the Honourable Hayden Hughes, and Greg Hughes, and the rest of the family. I am reminded of the words of the great philosopher, the late Bob Marley. The greatness of a man is not in how much wealth he acquires, but in his integrity and his ability to affect those around him positively. Mr. Hughes was that kind of man. His greatness may be recorded officially in his length of service, the long span of his political career, his 3 times serving as Chief Minister of Anguilla. But the real manifestation of his greatness was the large number of Anguillians, young and old, who lined the streets yesterday standing at attention or saluting and singing or saying thank you. Or those last night on the field in South Hill who spoke of the positive impact he had on their lives, including the community that he helped to live in Anguilla peacefully. That is the influence of the man. I reflect on a man whose very essence was one of service, compassionate leadership, sacrifice, integrity, and principled stubbornness. Mr. Hughes was governed by the courage of his conviction that Anguillians should be proud, strong, and free. He did not just stand on pomp and circumstance or wilt under pressure, but stood firm on principle and faced challenges head on. He was not afraid to embrace new ideas, but held on to the view that everything must be done in the best interests and well-being of the people of Anguilla. That is the measure of the man. Mr. Hughes, while successful in the United Kingdom, was impacted by the inequities he witnessed. He also became unsettled, realizing that he was privy to modern amenities while his people living in Anguilla were deprived. And he decided to return to Anguilla and get involved in politics so he could help his people. He came back to give back. His long political career was marked by service to his people and his country, and he made a significant contribution to Anguilla's development and regional integration. His influence was noted and noteworthy, and that is why many leaders from throughout the region and the other overseas territories sent letters of condolence, giving him high praise as a politician, but more so as a great human being. As a leader, Mr. Hughes sought unity and would reach out to his political opponents to gain consensus on issues, as stated by the Father of the House a little bit earlier, even at times getting them to join his administration. He was guided by his values of living within one's means, which resulted in prudent financial management, balanced budgets, and fiscal reserves. That is the legacy of the man. Mr. Hughes was an advocate for workers, especially those in the hospitality sector, and would show up whenever they needed him. He cared about the less fortunate and the vulnerable, especially the elderly, and advanced policies to provide assistance to those in need. For example, when elderly persons could not pay their water or electricity bills, he enabled the Water Corporation and ANGLEC to find ways to decrease the charges, and sometimes paid the bills from his own pocket. He opened his home to those who needed him, providing food and shelter, and even paying for medical attention for those who could not afford to pay. That shows the kindness of the man. Mr. Hughes was loved by his people, and he represented the common man. He had a presence and command which garnered respect and acceptance. He wanted and labored for an Anguilla where children could grow up and get a job, own a home, raise a family, where the streets are safe and everyone looked out for each other. He lived what he thought. Mr. Hughes instilled hope with his positive outlook and calm demeanor because he truly believed that the best days of Anguilla were still to come. As a mentor and a teacher, his historical perspective, his wealth of knowledge and vast experience always enlightened those who were fortunate to spend time in his presence. I am fortunate to have known Mr. Hughes, the politician and the man. Not only because he endorsed me to lead the party which he founded in 1979, but I have benefited directly from his leadership, his guidance, his knowledge, his influence, and his political savvy. He gave me insight on pertinent issues and taught me how to articulate policies and implement programs. He left an indelible mark on me that politics is about the people. I am here because he was here, and I am forever grateful. Today we pay tribute to our former Chief Minister, the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, for his sacrifice and his service to the people of Anguilla. We thank his wife and family for the shared sacrifice during his long, distinguished political career. I wish to thank all those who have spoken and those who will speak today and pay tribute to this great man. I also wish to thank you, Madam Speaker, and this honorable House for the respect shown to our former leader and statesman. May his soul rest in peace. And may God bless you and continue to bless Anguilla. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member for Island Harbor and Premier of Anguilla. At this time, we will invite the Steel Brass and Blues for a musical selection. Thank you, members of the Steel, Brass, and Blues. Well rendered. An invitation was also extended to former members who would have served with Mr. Hughes to attend this special sitting and render tribute. Some of those members who could not attend have sent their tributes in writing to be read into the record as well. During this time, we will invite those members to render tributes. The former member for Valley South and former Premier of Anguilla, Mr. Victor Banks, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to make a brief statement at this time to celebrate the life of the late Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, who was a member of this venerable institution for over 35 years, 11 of which he served as Chief Minister. But in truth and in fact, he was an icon in Anguillan politics for several decades. I also crave your indulgence, Madam Speaker, to directly address his dear wife, Mrs. Norma Hughes, and her immediate family, to thank them for sharing the late fallen leader with us for that period and more. Because we who have served or are serving in this honorable House can truly appreciate the sacrifice that such commitments to service in politics demand. Mrs. Hughes, while we commiserate with you at this time for your loss, we also recognize that there were times during his service when you may have felt that he was not available when the family needed him most. And so we feel moved to commend you for dutifully keeping it together. Our fallen patriot was a household name in Anguillan politics over many generations. I first came to know the late former Chief Minister, Mr. Hughes, while a student at the Valley Secondary School. I think it was around 1962. Mr. Hughes was an Anguillan returning at the time from the United Kingdom, and he delivered a speech at the Assembly of Students that may have been our first exposure to his lifelong thesis on colonial politics. It is a theme that ran through all of his speeches over his entire political career. Madam Speaker, it is ironic that we will be having a holiday to mark the passing of the late leader in the same week that we are celebrating a holiday for the birthday of the Queen of the largest colonizing empire on planet Earth. The late Chief Minister may have gotten a good laugh out of that coincidence. As a parliamentary colleague, I worked with Mr. Hughes both in government and in opposition. And despite our differences on several occasions, I came to respect his fervor for his beliefs and his skill as a politician in every aspect of his service. It was probably because of that fact, Madam Speaker, that I facilitated his opportunity to become Chief Minister of Anguilla in 1994. It was an opportunity that seemed unlikely, given the general belief around Anguilla at the time that Mr. Hughes seemed more comfortable in opposition. His contribution to Anguilla in every role that he served will be remembered by many of us in our several ways. If I were to sum up my experience with Mr. Hughes, I will not seek to rewrite history, as we often do on occasions such as this, but I will simply say it was not the smoothest relationship in my political career. Yet, I understood his attitude, style, and approach as the member from Valley North, the Honorable Evan McNeil Rogers, would put it. Obviously, I cannot say that he was kind to me politically, but in the arena of politics, such adversaries help to hone your own political skills. And in the wider arena of national politics in Anguilla, it is possible that if we did not have a Hubert Benjamin Hughes, we may have had to create one. On the other hand, he left a memorable mark on the people of Rhodes South constituency, where he served for over 60 years and was generally and greatly loved and admired. He lost one election in that period, and it's quite possible that if he did not choose to retire, he may still have been the representative for the constituency up until his departure from this life. But love him or leave him, there is no doubt that this fallen leader will continue to be referenced in the politics of Rhodes South and Anguilla for many years to come. I move to add here, Madam Speaker, that there was no significant difference between the late Chief Minister and myself on major political issues, including colonialism. However, his tenacity as he pursued these issues was phenomenal. He seemed to see everything through the colonial prism. He was relentless in his approach to making his views on colonialism and other subjects known to all and sundry. And in many ways, this affected his ability to create a stable environment for negotiation. But Mr. Hughes seemed much more comfortable in that space, and sometimes one wondered whether he understood that as a small fish in a big pond, there are times, and in some cases, where much more guile is required to survive or succeed. But that was Hubert, and I use his first name without any disrespect. And we must appreciate the importance in democracy of the balance that is required to get the most efficacious outcome. And indeed, were it not for his opposition at times, the lack of balance could have led to complacency and lack of transparency in governance over the years. As many people have said, and I quote, "If it were not for Hubert, we would not have known this or we would not have known that," unquote. In that context, I dare say, to my mind, our late Chief Minister will probably be more remembered for his service in opposition than in government. But there's no shame in that legacy. And so let me take this opportunity to admonish aspiring politicians that politics is not just about being in government. It is equally as important as being effective in opposition. And a further admonition, even in this somber moment, is the importance of speaking truth to power, as many politicians have found eventually that the lack of truthfulness can often come back to haunt us and even haunt our legacy. Madam Speaker, I implied earlier that the political relationship between our fallen brother and myself was at times torrid, but it also included lessons for many aspiring politicians and newly elected politicians in this honorable House. Whatever existed in our politics, Hubert and I, it never stopped us from being civil and courteous and being genuinely concerned about each other's well-being. We could always sit and have social interaction without acrimony or rancor. Madam Speaker, it is my favorite mantra that we are all dwarves on the shoulders of giants. That holds true in the history of nation building as in every other enterprise that traverses generations of people. We are here today celebrating one of those giants in our homeland. We are not here assessing the value of his contribution, but rather acknowledging the fact that he played his part as he interpreted it to be. We all will have different ways about the part he played, but on this occasion, we will leave that to the history books. Madam Speaker, let me conclude by thanking you once again for this opportunity to provide my personal flavor to the contribution of a fallen patriot, and extend my condolences to his wife and former First Lady, Mrs. Norma Hughes, his children, including the Honorable Hayden Hughes, especially my good friend, Greg Hughes, his siblings, including Captain Freddie Hughes. I understand there's a sister here today, Dorothy. I don't know her last name, but Mrs. Dorothy. His entire family circle, his many supporters, his many friends, and indeed the entire Anguilla community at home and abroad. May his soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you, Honorable former member for Valley South and former Premier. The Honorable former member for Valley South again, Mr. Evan Gums, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. After listening to everyone, and I had to rewrite my speech, I would just simply say Mr. Hughes was a good man, because everybody touched on just about everything I have on my speech, but I'll continue just the same. President, good morning to everyone. I consider it an honor and a privilege to say a few words after having worked under such a great leader for 5 years. It was not always a smooth road, but I survived. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for this opportunity of injustice of 3 minutes to talk about a man who spoke in the House for 3 days. It's hard to summarize such an honor in just 3 minutes. We know Mr. Hughes took us to Africa and back to get his point across, whereas I can only go as far as Siliki to get my points across in 3 minutes about Mr. Hughes. Madam Speaker, when we talk about Mr. Hughes, let us talk about what he stood for in principle. Madam Speaker, Mr. Hughes referred to the people as his friends and his people. When Mr. Hughes visited the hotels, it was about how his people were being treated and their jobs were threatened in tough circumstances, and they were being bullied by the managers. When the chief spoke, the investors knew a firm leader had spoken, and they had to back off. So today, if we're going to speak about the legacy of such a great man, Mr. Hughes, as a good one, let us carry on his legacy. Madam Speaker, I can say one bad thing about Mr. Hughes, and that is when we got elected in 2010 as a newly elected member, he threw me to the lions at my coup and never looked back. Madam Speaker, Mr. Hughes was always accused of fighting against the British, but he was not fighting the British. He was fighting for us, the people of Anguilla. He never took no for an answer when he could put a strong case and in turn get a yes for the benefit of the people of his country. When the other overseas territories were getting milk and honey, he wanted the same thing for Anguilla. He told the governor on several occasions, just like your Prime Minister in the UK wanted milk and honey for the UK, that is what I want for my people in Anguilla. It was not a fight. It was a stance taken for his people. One day, Mr. Hughes told the governor, "You may win the battle, but when the war is over, you would be so badly wounded, you won't be able to enjoy the victory." What a man. Madam Speaker, several times I sat in EXCO at party meetings, and I heard Mr. Hughes literally snoring, and I would bump him with my knee and say, "Chief, you're sleeping." And he would say, "No." But what I noticed, Madam Speaker, is that there were times when he was snoring and we thought he was sleeping, and someone would say something that was wrong, and he would open his eyes and say, that is not what happened. Let me tell you what happened. And he would set the record straight by saying, it happened on this day, this month, and this year. And he said, who said it or who did it? Madam Speaker, Mr. Hughes had a memory out of this world. When I grew up, I want a memory that sharp. Madam Speaker, maybe I'm living in denial, but I find it very hard to imagine Anguilla without Mr. Hughes. When my dad passed away several years ago, a pastor's wife said to me, life goes on. It was the most painful words I ever heard. But as I look back 29 years later, she was right. Life is not the same, but life will go on. But Anguilla will not be the same without this great man. He is gone, but he will never be forgotten. So let us keep his legacy alive. Madam Speaker, under his AUM-ADP coalition government, Anguilla had the fastest growing economy in the region. That says a lot about teamwork and his leadership. Madam Speaker, Mr. Hughes said to me one day, keep your hands clean and the British can't touch you. I took his advice, entered clean, and I left clean. Madam Speaker, Mr. Hughes said two things he desired before he leaves this earth. One was to see his country right and to make it right with his God. I'm happy to say he tried his best for his country, but he made his best move by making it right with his God, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. My prayer is that all parliamentarians and all seated here today will do the same so we can all meet in heaven, not to vote, talk politics, or struggle for power, but enjoy the splendor of heaven, sit at Jesus' feet, and miss hell's fire. There's an old quote my deceased mom always used. You never miss the water till the well run dry. One day we will come to the realization of the true loss of this great man. Some people used to say Hubert chat too much, while others would say thank God for him, or we would not know anything. This past few weeks, Madam Speaker, has been a sad few weeks, and it will continue through the years ahead as we mourn the loss of our brave and courageous leader that Anguilla and the Caribbean has ever witnessed. Mr. Hughes was a serious man when it came to government business, but he also loved humor and a good laugh. One of the things I always thought was funny about him was when someone who he never got along too well with, or the person never got along too well with him, and he managed to win them over. And he would say, boy, I have them eaten out of my hand. That was one of his favorite tropes. Madam Speaker, I trust that we can better the political party grievances and differences and look at the big picture and see the contributions made by our present, past, and deceased leaders. Unless we come to this realization, we'll be forever in quicksand. Always remember, Mr. Hughes always called for a national government. So in closing, on behalf of my family, my siblings, and their families, we'd like to extend our deepest condolences to Mrs. Norma Hughes and family, to the Honorable Hayden Hughes and family, Greg Hughes and family, past and present political colleagues, and to the entire Hughes family of Mr. Hughes. Our prayer is that God gives you strength in this time of loss. 1 Thessalonians 4:13. But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. May our political legend, my chief and political mentor, the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, rest in peace, and may his legacy live on. May God continue to bless Anguilla. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We now have written tribute that shall be read into the record from the Honorable former member of Sandy Hill, and who had to leave, unfortunately, and from the former Attorney General, Mr. James Wood. So I'll ask the clerk to read into the record those tributes.
Madam Speaker, friends of the Assembly, family members of the late Honorable Hubert B. Hughes, a pleasant good morning. Let me firstly express thanks to you, Madam Speaker, for the invitation to share brief remarks on this solemn occasion. Today, we are all gathered here to pay our respect to a giant of a man who, through his life's journey, showed what compassion, love, and patience was all about. Despite his many critics, the late Honorable Hubert B. Hughes moved slowly through life with an infectious smile of love and gratitude for friend and foe. His political journey was based on ensuring that Anguilla was kept in the hands of our people first and foremost. When the British placed roadblocks before him, he again smiled and did not allow such blocks to be used as weapons to oppress his people, but instead, the late Honorable Hubert B. Hughes sought to climb above those blocks one step at a time. I was privileged to have had the opportunity bestowed upon me by the residents of District Number 2 in 2010 to gain a first-hand experience of not just working with the Honorable Hughes, but being able to be empowered to lead a ministry under his watch. My travels to many of the OECS heads of government meetings with Mr. Hughes will be forever remembered, as those meetings allowed me an opportunity to see our statesman at work in the interests of the region and his place of birth. The Honorable Hughes was one of a kind, and his unique style, approach, and attitude, coined by the member for Valley North, embodied this kind gentleman. Today, I stand here to say thank you to his dear wife, Teacher Norma, and the rest of his family for enduring the political pain which was inflicted on him, all as a result of him working in the best way he knew to leave Anguilla in a better position than how he would have met it. As his body lies before us today and his voice is silent, I pray to God that his soul and the souls of all the faithful may continue to rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I served under Mr. Hubert Hughes throughout my time as Attorney General. He was quite clearly a man of the people who strived to support his community and Anguilla as a whole. He will be remembered, I have no doubt, as being a person who was in touch with the people he represented, showing humility and understanding. When he could have exhibited the trappings of wealth, he chose to drive an old pickup truck. This revealed a desire to stay part of the everyday life, a life where he would listen to everyone and share his own experiences. I learned a lot about Anguilla from Mr. Hughes. He had an astonishing memory for details of events that had happened many years ago. He would talk about them with passion and conviction. The same passion was shown in his speeches, where often unassisted by notes. He would firmly articulate his many views. As an orator and politician, he not only made his mark, but also showed others the way forward. I pass on my sincerest condolences to Mr. Hughes's wife and his entire family. This is a very sad loss for Anguilla, Mr. James Wood, QC.
Thank you. The Honorable former second nominated member, Mr. Claudel Romney, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, thanks for this opportunity. On behalf of my family, I express condolences to Teacher Norma, Honorable Hayden Hughes, Greg Hughes and their families, the grandchildren, his siblings, and the extended family. I served 13 years or 3 terms in the House as Deputy Speaker and second nominated member under 3 separate governments, the last being the Hughes administration. Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes was a great leader. I coin him as our Moses, very passionate and zealous. He would remind us of our history because the past determines our future. He was a one-man army, not afraid to take on any establishment, be it ECCB or the UK government. His 3-day speeches existed my day. I remember his 3-day filibuster when the rest of us sat here in this honorable house like wounded soldiers on the battlefield. And when we asked Hughes when he was going to finish, he would reply, "I ain't start yet." He said party politics like colonialism will be Anguilla's destruction. He lobbied for years for a national government. The characteristics of this leader include charismatic, jovial, to the point, not intimidated by anyone, never held grudges, internationally renowned. Never thought he knew it all. He consulted. I was privileged to serve on his advisory committee, and he would summon meetings within minutes because he was interested in others' viewpoints. He had his pet projects dear to his heart. One of them was Anglec reverting to Anguillan ownership away from CDC. He spoke often about the Birmingham airport. This was a visionary project of his. A labor champion. Don't mess with his people once they are qualified. He's not afraid of investor. If Anguillans are qualified for that job, he ain't approving work permits. Case closed, no further discussion. I recall a discussion with the UK delegation on the white paper. Conditions were laid down for the aid, which included legalization of homosexuality, dubbed human rights, and that he engaged the international media, that he not engage the international media without first consultation with the local UK governor. Hughes paused, closed his notebook, and said, "I keep your aid. We are not going to sell our souls for $1, a one-man army." But often he beat up on me in the House when I did not support his motions. He would berate me as his cousin and tell me I have my grandmother, Ernesta Hughes, his cousin, rolling over in her grave. But I did not let him down on the sick out that brought down his administration in my day. I refused to boycott the House with the other members. I vehemently oppose issues like the rounding up to 2/3 majority. Plan A did not work. Nonetheless, Plan B prevailed. Lastly, Madam Speaker, don't wait till one dies to give them their flowers. Last February, I brought Hughes a lovely bouquet of flowers and wrote him a note expressing my appreciation and thanks for what he had done for Anguilla as a whole and the role model he has been. While he was in Colombia, I would call him often, and those calls meant a lot to him. I heard him telling his nephew, anytime there's a call from Claude Romney, you get me. We talked about every aspect of Anguilla life and politics. You know, his body was sick and rare, but never his mouth. The best part of that conversation is that he said, and I quote, "I am very sick, but I am at peace, and I know and walk with my Jesus in a personal relationship. Whenever he comes for me, I am ready." Which one of us can say that? To his family, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. May his soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you, Honorable Second Nominated Member, Deputy Speaker, Mr. Claude L. Romney. The Honorable Nominated Member and Past Chaplain, Mr. Clive Smith, Sr., is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. and all the other organizers that made this possible for us here today. I think it is a very worthy and very good thing that we are going through for this great man. I would like to say to the family of Sister Nama and Brother Hayden, the present and the immediate and the extended families of this great man. I had the honorable privilege of working with Mr. Hughes in government and out of government, in opposition and in government. And we got along fine. I used to be assistant to the Honorable Kenneth Harrigan when we were in government. And as that, I used to always be attached to Public Works Department. So when I was there, I was the assistant to Kenneth Harrigan, and the fellows in Public Works, a lot of them used to always hope for the day when they would see the end of Brother Clive. He would have to go home. So in 2010, when Mr. Hughes won the government outright, and he had the Honorable Evans Gomes as his Minister of Public Works, and so on. The fellows them said, well, we got Brother Clive now, got to go home. But Mr. Hughes and Brother Clive was ahead of them. Mr. Hughes sent a message to the Honorable Evans Gomes, a good minister of government at that time. He said, Evan, nobody is going to trouble Clive Smith. And he said, I would give anything to have a man like Clive Smith as my supporter, as my colleague in government, or anything. He said, when you have Brother Clive on your side, you have a faithful and loyal supporter. He said, nobody is going to trouble Brother Clive. And I always remember that Mr. Gomes carried out that word from Mr. Hughes to the letter. And he had the support of the Honorable Edison Beard. I remember clearly Edison Beard said, Brother Clive, nobody is going to trouble you. So we had a good working relationship. Now, I don't want to be a hypocrite. Mr. Hughes was a man of many words. And sometimes, when you listen to him, he could be very harsh. But one thing I want to let you know, no one was ever able to say that Mr. Hughes was a violent man. He might have been a little harsh with his words and statements and things, but no one can say he was violent. He was always still a loving, understanding, and peaceful person. In closing in my remarks, I want to just make mention of this. while I was always in tune, listening about Mr. Hughes and his illness in Colombia, and praying for him night and day, he and his family, I got a bulletin of news. And that bulletin of news said that Mr. Hughes have met with his Savior, Jesus Christ, and he is now a Christian. That blessed my heart, and that will remain with me. And I want us all here in this house to know that Mr. Hughes left a great example for us, because every one of us here in this house today and listening to my voice, we have a God to glorify and a soul to save. And if we neglect the opportunity to do what Mr. Hughes did, then you will fall in the hands of the words of St. Paul. How shall you escape when you neglect so great a salvation, which is provided for us by Jesus Christ, our Savior? Mr. Hughes, you serve your country and your people well. May your soul rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Honorable former nominated member and chaplain, Mr. Clive Smith. We now have remarks from past Attorney General, Mr. Ronald Scipio, to be read into the record.
Let me begin by expressing my thanks and appreciation to the Honorable Speaker and the Clerk of the Anguilla House of Assembly for affording me the opportunity to say a few words in appreciation of the late Honorable former Chief Minister of Anguilla, Mr. Hubert Hughes. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend in person to make this offering due to overseas travel commitments. However, my thoughts and condolences are with his widow, Mrs. Norma Hughes, children, and other members of his family. It came as a shock to me, as it must have also for the people of Anguilla, to learn of the passing in early May 2021 of the former Chief Minister and long-serving member of the Anguilla House of Assembly, Mr. Hubert B. Hughes. I was aware that Mr. Hughes had been doing poorly, but did not realize that he had so little time left on this earth. No doubt he would have been comforted in the care of his loving family. Due to my relatively recent arrival in Anguilla in 1995, I am unable to speak to the same history and relationship with Mr. Hughes as other long-serving current and former members of the Anguilla House of Assembly. However, as Attorney General of Anguilla, I was able to observe at close hand Mr. Hughes's commitment to working in the interests of Anguilla and its people. Mr. Victor F. Banks, in his statement in the Anguillian newspaper on 12 May 2021, referred to Mr. Hughes as a patriot, patriotism, and his commitment to Anguilla. His conflicts with the UK government in pursuing and furthering Anguilla's interests are well documented. In carrying out my duties as Attorney General, I, like many others, have had differences with Mr. Hughes. He could at times be a very difficult person to deal with, but nevertheless, I had great respect for his professionalism and skills as a politician and his commitment to the Anguilla cause. He did not shirk from stating his mind and in pursuing his political objectives. He demonstrated the utmost determination and single-mindedness. His forthrightness may not always have been appreciated by his political opponents, but they always knew where he stood on a particular issue. In that regard, Mr. Hughes deserves to be remembered and revered as one of Anguilla's great politicians. My sympathies are with his wife, children, and other family members. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Mr. Ronald Scipio, QC.
Thank you. The Honourable former member for Island Harbour, Mr. Kenneth Harrigan, is recognized.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm going to make it short, but because you all have said everything about Mr. Hughes, you're telling the truth and you're right. So I leave that part, you know. But I want to say good morning to Mrs. Hughes, wonderful woman, her two sons, Hayden and Gregory, my friends. You know, me and Mr. Hughes have gone a long way. I believe if I was a woman, he would have tried to tell me something. So we had loved each other so much. I sat on that side of the aisle and Mr. Hughes was here. And we teased each other. The speaker sometimes would say, you know, have some respect for the House. But as soon as she looked in her books, I would tease him, you know. I want to say something about Mr. Hughes. He was an honorable leader. Mr. Hughes could have been, he was educated enough to be an attorney general, a lawyer, a judge, and look sharp if the Queen husband had died before. He would have married to the Queen. That is if Nama was dead. But he also had problems, you know, with the Queen. And anyhow, I remember one day when I was the captain, I was a great captain, and he used to pretend that he's a captain too. He knows nothing about captain a boat. But one day, the custom was giving me problems. To clear my boat, we was going to Trinidad with a load of salt because I needed a real license. I mean, we got a license from the government to operate. But then I went to Cuba and get a real license, you know. You pay a few dollars, you get a license. But knowing about captaincy, I still believe I was a better captain than Mr. Hughes. Mr. Hughes was in England for so many years. Good man. And all that is said today about Mr. Hughes is true. Brilliant man. But what he know about captain a boat? Nothing. He buy a boat when he come from England, he turn off, going Barbados, he end up not of no, he reached no Barbados. Antigua, not Antigua. So every time we tease each other, you know, he know not motorboat really. And although I've sing two boats already as a captain too. Anyhow, I remember one day we had a problem going to Trinidad with a load of salt from here, and they wouldn't accept my license anymore here, you know. And I come to Mr. Hughes as chief minister, and he said to me, come. We had loved each other so much. We walked from his office right over to the roundabout where the treasurer was there then. He said, come on, you got to give this man a license. He got a boat at the pier, you know. And they give me a license, you know. Mr. Hughes is great. Walk. I could say so many good things about Mr. Hughes. He was really a good man. He loved Anguilla. He loved the people in Anguilla. He was a true leader. Mr. Hughes wanted me to work with him. I said, no, Mr. Hughes, I'm an honor person in government, so and so. But we tease each other so much. Mrs. Hughes, you had a wonderful husband. And to his two sons, he was a real dad. Real dad. He meant well for Anguilla. So, today we are here because we love him. And I pray that God will take over from here and whatever is best for Mr. Hughes. Someday we hope, if we live a faithful life, to see him in heaven. So let's live a faithful life. I could say so much about Mr. Hughes. Real good man. Good family. You know? And sometime I go down with Nama and me and Mr. Hughes will speak for time. And he would never call me Kenneth, Ken. And we don't do. I mean, the whole thing is that you all have spoken well and you have told the truth. But you know, I like to tease, you know. You know. Now, he would say to me, oh, I want one of those girls in Island Harbor. I said, Mr. Hughes, you can't handle no girl no more, man. You know. I couldn't handle them myself. So we had a good time in the House Assembly, teasing each other. And I pray that God will take over from here. And I pray that all the new politicians will try whatever they do it for the good of Anguilla, like Mr. Hughes, for the people. So God bless you. Love you all.
Thank you, Honorable former member for Island Harbor. Now we'll have read into the record a written tribute from the past Deputy Governor, Mr. Mark Capes.
Anyone who met Mr. Hubert Hughes would not easily forget him. During my 4 years of service as Deputy Governor of Anguilla, I came to know him quite well. He was a major feature of Anguilla's political landscape for so many years. Mr. Hughes was known for his strongly held, unshakable views on many political and other matters. He would invariably express those views in a robust fashion in his distinctive, penetrating, and immediately recognizable voice. I recall that following my first meeting with Mr. Hughes, I was really unsure what to make of him, and perhaps he held a similar view of me. But after a while, as we got the measure of each other, we always much enjoyed our conversations, and we would greet each other warmly whenever we met. Although we held opposing positions on many topics, Mr. Hughes had a fine sense of humor, and I recall laughing with him to the point of tears on several occasions. Mr. Hughes was indeed a memorable man who will be missed by many. I extend condolences to his family and friends. Mr. Mark Capes.
Apologies have been made for the absence of Mrs. Keisha Carty. And now I make apologies also for the Reverend John A. Gums, who was going to be present this morning, but unfortunately felt unwell, so was unable to make it. Apologies for the record. Now, written tribute read into the record for Mr. Wilhelm Bourne, past Attorney General.
A tribute to the late Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, former Chief Minister of Anguilla. To the Honorable Speaker and members of the Anguilla House of Assembly, the Honorable Premier and members of the government, other distinguished and senior officials and persons, to Anguillians generally, greetings to all. This tribute, as referred in the heading above, is a brief narrative because of time and space considerations as required by the Honorable Speaker of the House of Assembly of Anguilla. I served as Attorney General of Anguilla from December 2006 to December 2010. During that period, I also served, amongst other duties, as a member of the Executive Council and the House of Assembly. I first met and spoke with the Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes in early December 2006, following my arrival in Anguilla to assume the office of Attorney General. Mr. Hughes extended a pleasant welcome and stated that he had not been to the Attorney General's chambers for a long time. He indicated past issues prevented him. I invited him to visit me in office to get a sense of his concerns that were causing him to stay away. Within a matter of days, Mr. Hughes was at the chambers. However, his concerns were more of a political nature. Nevertheless, the visits continued, and from time to time, the front office staff would call to say Mr. Hughes is back again. It was a new day to focus on a practical working relationship with him in the interest of good governance. And he seemed to be in a better place that he could visit again. We both generally got on with the day-to-day concerns of the people of Anguilla. I served with him on the Executive Council, in the House of Assembly, and on various ad hoc committees in relation to the day-to-day affairs of the government of Anguilla, in his capacity as leader of the Anguilla United Movement, and later on as Chief Minister. The function of Attorney General is meant to represent all of Anguilla in its public and sometimes private affairs. Mr. Hughes was then the leader of opposition. I found him to take a robust stance on most matters in those days, and in my opinion, he was feared and misunderstood as to where his focus lay. He was a consummate politician aiming to follow principles in relation to the governance and affairs of Anguilla. I would say he had an independent or individualistic mindset, which was not swayed easily, if at all, by others. But that mindset did not settle well with others either, yet he would pursue what he thought was the correct pathway. In the words of the late Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. Yes, he did it his way. But he was not always a serious face. As the occasion arose, Mr. Hughes could display humor to match the occasion. One example was during a very well-attended meeting at the Executive Council, chaired by then His Excellency the Governor. Mr. Hughes was napping, eyes closed and head leaning, and a senior official was anxiously trying to get his attention as Chief Minister. You following me, Mr. Hughes? Mr. Hughes, you following me, Mr. Hughes? Mr. Hughes opened his eyes, looked around the table for a moment, and with calm demeanor and his famous smile, said to the official, I hear with my ears. You know. Everyone in the room went weak with laughter. It was a classic, timely piece of humor. The meeting took a few minutes to settle down again. I will end there at this time. I extend to his wife and sons sympathy and condolences from my family to them and to all other family members and friends, and to the people of Anguilla, whom he served in its public affairs for many years. May his soul rest in peace and rise in glory. I wish you all God's blessings. Sincerely, Dr. Wilhelm C. Bourne.
Thank you. The Honourable former member for Island Harbour, Mr. Atlan Anthopol, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is a privilege to have been asked to give brief remarks or a tribute on behalf of my working with the former Chief Minister of Anguilla, Mr. Hughes. I want to use this opportunity to extend condolences to his family, his wife, Teacher Norma, Honorable Hayden Hughes, a good colleague of mine, and
to Greg and the other members of the close members of the family. Knowing Mr. Hughes, when I first came into contact with Mr. Hughes, it was nothing to do with politics. I first met him, it would have been sometime early in the early 1980s. As a young social worker at the Department of Social Welfare, Honorable Hughes would usually come to the department, and well, we had two Hugheses that came to the Department of Social Welfare on behalf of members of their constituency. And Honorable Hughes would come in, he'll be waiting to see, at the time it was Lena Hoyoung, Lena Connor, but now Mrs. Hoyoung, the director at the time, Mrs. Romney. And in waiting, he would come to my office and sit down, and a conversation would always strike up, and Honorable Hughes would do what he did best. He spoke a lot. And we got to know each other fairly well. He spoke about quite a bit about the region and the rest of the world. Now, I often enjoy listening to his long lectures. I mean, I'm a lover of history, so I enjoyed his lectures. And I learned some valuable lessons from Mr. Hughes. When I decided to enter politics, we spoke one day, I think it was at the post office, and he gave me some valuable advice that I took, and I used it as well. And from 2010 to 2015, I had the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to work with Mr. Hughes. I was myself and Evans McNeil Rogers in the opposition, and across from us was Mr. Hughes and his government. And we had some very good times in government. Yes, as someone said earlier, Mr. Hughes, like he is, he could be rough at some time, but behind all of that was that respectable gentleman. He was never disrespectful. He got across his points, but he was always respectable. And I enjoy working with him. My colleague Evan said earlier that he had a way that even though he would rough you up sometime on the floor, when the time come to make a decision, he was man enough to come to you and say, well, listen, I need to get this done. Help me with my decision. And as opposition, we worked along with him across the aisle. And I want to say to Anguilla that we have lost a giant of a man. He has worked for Anguilla tirelessly. I know we're going to miss him, and I believe that he fought a good fight, and as I heard, he made peace with his Savior, and that is important. I want to once again say to his family, take heart to know that he did that. And we would all want to see him one day. I hope that we all will be faithful enough and make peace with our Savior, that in the end, we all can meet again. Now, take heart to know that we will be praying for you, and I ask all of Anguilla to remember the family. Sometimes we remember a family when someone dies, and that is it. But we need to understand that after the funeral, after the burial, we still need to look out for them and pray for them. On behalf of my family, once again, my immediate family and my extended, I would like to say to you, God bless you, take heart, we'll continue to pray for you, and thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Former Member for Island Harbour, Mr. Austin Anthopol. We now have read into the record written remarks by Mr. Samuel Connor, past nominated member.
Anguilla has lost a true leader in the honorable past member, Mr. Hubert Benjamin Hughes. My deepest condolences to his wife and entire family. I have known Mr. Hughes for over 56 years. I was one of Mr. Hughes's cell leaders in his political campaign back in the early 70s when he entered the political scene. He was a leader of the people. He was a leader that listened and acted upon the cries of our island nation. I had the privilege to serve in the Anguilla House of Assembly alongside Mr. Hughes from 2000 to 2005. Even though we were on different sides of the aisle, we worked well together and in the best interest of the people we served. As a young man entering the political arena, he would give advice on how to stand for what you believe and follow your convictions. In so doing, he demonstrated that to the fullest of his ability. My family and I are truly saddened by his passing and wish that his family and the entire Anguillan community find solace in his memories. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Mr. Samuel Connor.
The Honorable former member for Road North, Mr. Edison Baird, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'll simply adopt the protocol already established. I have had the privilege of knowing the late Honorable Hubert Benjamin Hughes, the former Chief Minister of Anguilla, for a very long time. I first met him in my teens. For some reason, I was given the job to announce his political meetings in the village of Sandy Ground. In those days, the bullhorn was the mode of communication in the political community. I'm still trying to figure out what was heavier, the bullhorn or me. At that meeting, I said a few words. I can't recall exactly what I said, but Mr. Hughes and a few others told me, "You talk good." This was my introduction to local politics. Later on, still in my teens, we again established a rapport. I was a student at the Bastia Senior School in Sinkis and would travel to Anguilla to spend my holidays. I came to Anguilla on the motor vessel St. Andrew, a boat owned and captained by Mr. Hughes. The St. Andrew was high-sided and rocked from side to side until we anchored at the road bay. I got the impression that the St. Andrew was designed to stop its sailors from falling asleep. Mr. Hughes and I discussed politics throughout the night, and we continued to talk politics when the St. Andrew made a brief stop in St. Bart's to offload cargo. He made use of big words and spoke in an embellished manner. Probably this was England's influence on him. Anyway, his message was clear. The British government was not doing enough to help Anguilla and the other islands. Anguilla, in his opinion, would have been better off making its own decisions about what was good for it. He could then be regarded as a nationalist. One could debate his approach to politics, but his heart and mind were correctly positioned. At times, we had disagreements over policy and Anguilla's relationship with the British government, but nevertheless, they were contained within the context of our friendship. Over the years, Mr. Hughes made several meaningful statements. He said a politician should never fraternize and socialize with investors. He claimed that if you did, they would seek to control you and would end up running the island. I am sure everyone must have heard him state on numerous occasions that you can't tax a dead economy. The implication of this statement was clear. If you tax it, as we say colloquially, you kill the economy dead. He may be gone from us physically, but his words should not be forgotten. I want to talk now about actually working with Mr. Hughes in government, specifically about the ADP-AUM coalition government 1994 to 1999. He was the chief minister. Mr. Banks was the Minister of Finance, and Mr. Albert Hughes was the Minister of MIQ. I, Edison Beard, was the Minister of Social Services. I want to go on record as saying, in my opinion, this was the best government Anguilla ever had and is likely to have for a long time. No minister, not even the chief minister, could dictate to his colleagues. No minister could impose his will on the other ministers. The other three ministers would restrain him. Strengthening the power of restraint was the fact, and everybody in government knew it. Not a member of the opposition would cross the floor and join the government. Every member of government, therefore, was focused on making a positive impact on the development of the island. During this period, Mr. Hughes was a steady hand guiding the island through difficult times. For many years, as leader of the opposition, he kept the government on its toes. He made extensive use of the media at home and abroad. He frequented the BBC, criticizing the conduct of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, always making the point that it was not doing enough to develop the island. His honesty was an important shield that he wore proudly, and it protected him in his long and illustrious career. Whether you agreed with him or not, you knew where he stood on the issues. He refused to be bridled, irrespective of the consequences for his political career. I take this opportunity to extend my condolences to his wife, Mrs. Norma Hughes, his sons, including the Honorable Hayden Hughes, who represents the Road South constituency that Mr. Hughes represented collectively for over 40 years. I extend my condolences to his sister and his other family members. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, former member for Road North, Mr. Edison Baird. We now invite audio from the past member for West End, Mr. Walcott Richardson.
Madam Speaker, let me extend my heartfelt condolences to the families of the Honorable Hubert Hughes. I do so on behalf of the extended family at Frederiksted and by extension the people of District 7 and on my own behalf. My profound condolences goes out to the people of Anguilla and to the wider diaspora across the region of the Caribbean. In 1980, I made my political debut at a rally at West End on a Thursday afternoon. At that time, it was only three faithful men, the late Ronald Webster, Albert Hughes, and Hubert Hughes. They were a band of honorable men hoping to find one more honest man or woman to bring to the finish line. Sadly, there wasn't any. Then in 1999, I was able to work with him in his short-lived administration as his parliamentary secretary. What a learning experience it had been, Madam Speaker. I would not defoul this celebration with sordid details of that period, but be it sufficed to acknowledge that the dearly departed demonstrated class and leadership to the superlative degree unmatched by any of his peers of the day. And then 2010, as I can recount, Madam Speaker, it was the first time he was able to put a full government devoid of forming any coalition partnership. Madam Speaker, I was old enough too when he was tagged as unable to work with others. He was dubbed as Confusion. if he ever had reason, and they were not a few, to make reference to the African liberation struggle or expounded on the plantocracy system, he was deliberately called a racist by those who knew better. Sadly, to mention the term colonization, it was sufficient to call it hogwash by him who knew not the difference. You know, Madam Speaker, those were the days when many would have shied away from him, not having any association. He talked too much, they would say. But it was the late Comrade David Smith that cleared the stage for my brother Samuel Webster to stand fearlessly in his corner to bring the first and only female to the seat of the Speaker of the House. Chief was kind and compassionate beyond comprehension. He was trusting to a fault. If we had time to pause for a minute, we would hear the resounding echo of that sucker punch he endured for the love of the country. And still, Madam Speaker, he found it a joy within his bosom to reconcile and seek no revenge. Madam Speaker, that was more Christ-like rather than a Boris Yeltsin style politics. I said before that he was trusting to a fault. The records bear the evidence. Time will fail me, Madam Speaker, to tell of his struggles more about wanting more autonomy for the people of Angola, the devolution of power, and a more modern, advanced constitution. I do not now have the time to tell of his standing in the region and beyond. Only mention his name to the people across the pond, south of Angola, and you'll get a taste of how much he was revered. 3 minutes, Madam Speaker, is but a bare minimum to tell the story of a man that gave 3 decades of his life to the struggle. Remember, Madam Speaker, he was gifted to be able to speak for days when debating the budget. But the rules are the rules, and I confirm. Thanks for the opportunity again. So I conclude that we rejoice for our brother deceased. Our loss is his infinite gain, his soul out of prison released and freed from his bodily chain. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Thank you.
And thank you. Past member for West End, Mr. Walcott Richardson. Another light moment, we'll have a musical selection by the Alvina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School Music Department. We thank the members of the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School Music Department for their beautiful rendition and ably conducted by teacher Lennox Anthopol. Thank you. We now have messages of condolence entered into the record on behalf of parliaments of the region.
From the Parliament of the Cayman Islands, the Speaker's Chambers, Dear Honorable Webster Bourne, condolences on passing of Honorable Hubert Hughes. On behalf of myself and the Parliament of the Cayman Islands, I write expressing my deep-felt sadness to hear of the passing of former Chief Minister Hubert Benjamin Hughes. It's understandable that the citizens and people of Anguilla are mourning the death of a stalwart and giant in the political arena. Considering he has served 3 stints as being Chief Minister, which spanned over his 45 years of his political life since 1976. He was an affable and effective representative of the people of Anguilla, and his tenacity and involvement impacted positively on other overseas territories. He has influenced socio-economical growth and brought political maturity to the political landscape with his leadership attributes. He always stood adamantly for the interests of Anguilla as he made his representation at the Joint Ministerial Council meetings in London and in other forums. We extend our deep and heartfelt sympathies as the island has lost an outstanding patriot and nation builder. We wish the people of Anguilla all the strength and comfort during this difficult time. Please accept on behalf of members of Parliament our sincerest condolence for your loss. The Honorable Dr. W. McKeever Bush, Speaker of the Parliament of the Cayman Islands. From the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Montserrat. Dear Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the Speaker, Clerk, staff of the Montserrat Legislative Office, please accept our condolences to you and the people of Anguilla on the passing of former Premier Mr. Hubert B. Hughes. As the years pass and we lose the stalwarts of our countries, we stand resolute that their efforts will not go in vain. So I encourage you to stand on his shoulders and continue to build a strong, resilient Anguilla. May his legacy live on for years to come. Regards, the Honorable M. Latoya Charliana White, Speaker, Montserrat Legislative Assembly.
I now invite the chaplain to give the benediction. Can the assembly please stand?
Just before I close, I would like to, on behalf of my wife, Wanda, and myself, to extend our deepest condolences to Norma Hughes and the rest of the family. We pray that God will strengthen and grant you the grace that you will continue to walk on with him. There is one song that says, "Be not dismayed, whatever betide, God will take care of you." We do pray your strength in God and pray that you will find the courage to continue to walk on. Can we bow our heads at this time? Blessed be God, even the Father, our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comfort us in all our tribulation, that we might be able to comfort them which are in trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen and amen.
Adjournment. Recognized.
Madam Speaker, I beg that this Honorable House be adjourned sine die.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that this Honorable House stands adjourned sine die. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned sine die. Thank you, members.